Sorry, there was a call from MOS office. We are also preparing parallelly for the evening program. And that's the essence of this whole Bharat Swasthya Utsav, wherein one of the key uh, center attraction which we have kept in this celebration this year is because of 75 years of Amrit Utsav, what we are celebrating for the country. Similarly, we wanted to celebrate for our doctors. So this time we have focused on Padma Shri doctors. And in the evening, we are having more than 50 Padma Shri, Padma Bhushan celebrated doctors to be amongst us, where Union Health Minister Dr. Mansukh Mandavia and MOS Dr. Bharti Pawar, they both are gracing the occasion in the evening. So today, that's why we have our chair, Dr. Mahipal Sachdev. He doesn't need much introduction. He's a Padma Awardee himself, Padma Shri Awardee, the pioneer of healthcare, what you call eye care in India, one of the pioneers. I remember, and most of the people on the panel have been fortunate enough to work with them for the last 20 years. I have 20 years, 10 years, a decade. I have known most of the people on the panel, except Prashant. Hi, Prashant. Hi. So I'll keep it very light. I'm not going to be the professor. Because I am myself a student, these people are my professors. So I'll keep it light. So today, the enablement of the healthcare startup ecosystem, which is the topic today, is basically Dr. Amit Verma gave a brilliant overview about health tech and the enablement related various key issues which we are discussing today, and in our overall healthcare ecosystem, what keeps coming from time to time. So I would first like to start with our chair, Dr. Mahipal Sachdev sir. Since Dr. Amit has given the pretext of this whole session, so I'll not repeat it again. He's brilliantly captured so many beautiful slides, very briefly what we have seen just now. So sir, you have been one of the pioneers of healthcare startup when probably healthcare startups were very few. And I remember you were just a professor and a doctor at AIIMS, and suddenly you said that, okay, now I want to set up a eye care chain in India. And you thought of not only coming out, a lot of doctor entrepreneurs are there for ages across the world in India, but you not only thought of setting 1 or 2 or 3 clinics, but you thought of that time you had a vision of setting India needs a chain of eye care centers. So with that perspective, rather than asking any specific questions, sir, would like to have your perspective on, one is your experience, which you went through, that thought process at that time, how challenging it was. Not very funders were there at that time, not very big fund houses like Quadria or so many organized fund houses were there. But then, so how would you like to, what type of experience and key points you would like to share, particularly in the current healthcare startup ecosystem? Because sir, what happens today, if anybody thinks of, I've met a lot of healthcare founders, and most of them I've seen, when they come up with a healthcare startup idea, so first thing they think about is funding, that we should get the funding immediately. And sometime in that journey, people stop focusing on the product, the business module, the implementation, the overall success of the initial proof of concept. So your view on from that perspective, Dr.
Well, thank you very much, Sudhir. Pleasure being here. The question you basically asked me as to what started the story for Center for Sight, and how you would say is the startup system, or what does an entrepreneur look at, or how one should look at going into these innovations and things. I think the first and the foremost thing is that you need to find out what is the need. Or if you are doing something like an AI or whatever, so you have to come out with a need and a hypothesis that if we do this particular thing, this is how we are going to succeed, and then you start working on that thing. I think those who have written scientific papers, the most easy thing is to write is the materials and methods and the results. And then you come on to the discussion and then the intro, but the most difficult thing is to write the abstract. So when you are wanting to look at a problem and to be a startup or to be an entrepreneur, I think you should put down on paper your vision and what you are wanting to do and what you are wanting to solve. And that should be not more than one pager. It's very easy to write 50 pages or 100 pages thesis, but when you condense it, nichod nikal ke uska, that is what you have to write. And then you have to see as to what is the problem. Now, in India, when we looked specifically at eye care, the problem was that it was not considered to be a super specialization. And that is how the world was progressing as regards going on to super specialization. And if at all there was super specialization, that was in All India Institute of Medical Sciences in RP Center, where obviously you have the problems of a government setup and the growth rate, etc., is often dictated by political concerns, etc., of an individual as to how high you are going when you become the director, when you become chief, etc., etc. You know, there are so many pulls and pressures. Today, AIMS is without a director, so it's happening another 3 months, another 3 months extension, things like that. Not without a doctor, but without a full time. So what was important was to find out as to what was the niche thing that was being provided by people at that time, and that was a super specialized eye care facility that is there. And as was said by the earlier speaker, that patience is something very, very important, and you have to do a SWOT analysis as to what exactly are your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and what are you going to achieve out of this whole thing? What is the competition which is there? And that is what I did, and that is what we thought, that these are the things which people look for. These are the things which are not there. And mind you, what is very, very important is at times we talk a lot about affordability, but then there is also the talk about quality, which is equally essential. That we looked at providing the super specialized, cutting edge, top class quality, and therefore you have to be not a me too product. You have to establish yourself as doing something which is different from what others are doing, and giving, like for us it was giving super specialized eye care, and that is where we looked at and we went on. Yes, another thing, doctors do not have a single course of management or a single lecture during MBBS on any of these things as to how to professionally manage, and therefore हमारी जो सोच होती है, that is very limited, which is only limited to doing medicine and seeing patients, etc. And private equity again was considered to be a bad word, that they are hawks and vultures and things like that. I personally worked with 3 of them, but I feel that they and you can together create things which are going to be exponentially growing, and that is something very, very important. So for an entrepreneur, I would say that the things that are important is lay down what is the problem, lay down the hypothesis, lay down what you are going to do, lay down as to how it is going to be different, lay down as to what it will deliver, which is not available just now in the market. And this is what is called as innovation. And above all, whether you want to do the quality or you want to do affordability or you want to do a mission of both things are possible. And then you have to have your assessment of your strengths. And in these strengths, as was said, I think funding can come, but you should be bootstrapped initially, and you should look at being able to reach a particular level. And it is then only when the funding agencies start looking at you. But do not be averse to failures. Do not take unforeseen risks, that basically it's something that you're just doing which you know is going to blow up. Take risks which are calculated, graduated, and you need to go in the proper direction. So I think the environment today is pretty conducive for people, especially in healthcare, as after COVID people have realized the need for healthcare. And there is going to be more money that is going to come in healthcare that is happening. All these big tech things that came up are obviously the froth is settling down, but healthcare is for real. And that is going to increase over time. As was said, 15% growth can be gone on to 30%. I think those are the important things. The mind needs to have the intuition, the gut, and the strength to follow a particular path that this is what I am going to resolve. So I think that is what I would wish to say is what an entrepreneurial mindset should be and how one can develop onto that journey.
Thank you, sir. One key point you made is that as a startup founder, one should look at as a product or a technology or a service which solves, which sort of makes an attempt to solve a problem in a way which has not been done before. That's one of the key things. Uh, Mr. Naresh Hasija, who represents Viatris, I have known him for about 10 years, and he's one of the very active guys in public health and also works actively with the startup healthcare startup ecosystem. So, Naresh, my question to you is on, as a healthcare industry veteran, your perspective to make a startup successful. Very, very generic question.
So I think we have stalwarts of startup industry here. I personally believe it is not like used to see in college, where like we have to identify a problem and start working on it. We will able to create a startup. It is actually, particularly in healthcare, you have to truly identify a gap. If you are able to identify the gap properly, I don't think so. There are further challenges. Second thing which I see is like most of the startups, don't take it otherwise, are basically without healthcare experts. So my request will be like we have to have healthcare experts along the journey because they can give a lot of insight. In earlier panel, like Dr. Mahajan was insisting on the same point. I also strongly believe healthcare is well known with professionals like all of you, and startups have to really take guidance. Third point, what I see around is go to market, which is again a very, very crucial part. So once product in healthcare is ready, in go to market, I foresee now like it is like large companies who should come forward and start adopting. Maybe there can be a policy by government of because like healthcare is like considered to be more of a charitable industry. So I strongly believe instead of making that way, what we can do is we can get handhold 3-4 startups, maybe by large companies, or large companies can create a bigger group to really solve healthcare problems at the root. Go to market for a startup right now, it is like for as sir said rightly, maybe if you are bootstrapped and if there are not much fundings available, you can see that the data what talks about it, as he said, froth is settling down. We had 450 startups registered in 2016, which is now like 70,000 startups, and 4,000, 5,000 startups are working on IoT and AI, in particularly in healthcare. So maybe Prashant will able to answer this question better. How many of them could come out in the market and really provide a right solution? So just to summarize this, my suggestion is maybe a good handholding by healthcare professionals, go to market by large organizations who can seriously, who knows the industry well and deeper. Like for example, if somebody has to launch a solution for pharma industry, particularly let's take an example of retailers or wholesalers. So what do you want to do? You want to either deploy people to go to retailers or wholesalers, or you would like to work with a pharmaceutical company who has 5,000 people at the ground, has access to 400,000 retailers already. So I will choose to go with the large organizations who have already created access, the kind of partnerships we can evolve in that space. Thank you.
Thank you, Naresh. So coming to Prashant, so Prashant, one is definitely explain a bit about your very interesting startup, which is of course now a very successful company, Qure.ai. And as Dr. Verma already touched that point in his presentation of how AI is now so abused. So definitely we'd like to have your perspective on what really AI is and how you're using in healthcare and how it should be used in whether it is disease management or any aspect of healthcare.
Thank you. Thank you for that question, actually. I'll first answer the second part. AI is a term which is quite abused. I mean, people talk about AI for everything, including basic math calculations. Now, I mean, everything is called AI enabled. In reality, AI, at least the promise of AI is in some of the areas that Dr. Amit spoke about, right? Which is machine learning, which is natural language processing. Those are the areas where you see a lot of improvement in AI over the last 5 to 6 years, I would say, and especially image recognition. And that is one area which has been completely transformed by AI. And about 7, 8 years back, if you had an algorithm try to understand an image, it was very hard for it to be able to figure out what's going on in an image, whether it's a cat or a dog. That was very hard, and you cannot teach the algorithm. For example, if you want to teach the algorithm what a bottle is, you have to give it all the features of the bottle. And you cannot do that for every object in the world. But with the latest technologies that came about 7 years ago or so, which is called artificial neural networks, you could basically just give the algorithm a lot of data and it will automatically figure it out. And that leads me to what we are doing as a company. My company, I am co-founder and CEO of Qure.ai. We use the same kind of AI, which is built or which is basically being used by Google or a Facebook. And we use that on medical imaging AI, medical imaging, to build medical imaging solutions. So we have got algorithms that can interpret X-rays, that can interpret CT scans, that can interpret ultrasound images. The idea is simple. I mean, you basically give the algorithm a lot of data. So you give it millions and millions of scans along with the radiologist reports, and it automatically figures out what the abnormality is. For example, we are able to teach the algorithm to understand what about 60 different abnormalities on a chest X-ray, about 20 different abnormalities on a head CT scan, and so on ultrasounds and other technologies. Right. So that is what the algorithm does. Now, our company is about 6 years old. We are today present in about 62 countries. We are deployed at about 700 hospitals, and we touch close to 5 million lives on an annual basis right now. So it's scaled up. We are FDA cleared. We are CE marked. We have got about 40 plus peer-reviewed publications in the likes of Lancet, Nature Scientific, and so on. And I think coming to the first part of the question, right? I mean, I think for us, what we found is that, like I think Dr. Amit said, Dr. Mahipal said, Naresh also said this, right? That it is very important to identify a problem that you're trying to solve. And a lot of times technology comes in and we feel like, okay, there is this really cool technology, AI, blockchain, all cool words, but what exactly are you solving for? And for us, we found, I'll talk about some of the solutions that we've implemented. So just to get a sense of where it is helping. So we have an AI solution which can detect TB from a chest X-ray, right? Now, TB, if you know, is still a rampant disease. I mean, it is killing more people than COVID. It has been killing more people than COVID. It has taken more than 1 billion lives till now. And it's something which is not going away. We want to eradicate TB by 2025 in India. The global goal is 2030, but doesn't look like we are going to get to those timelines. And one of the ways that you can screen for TB is by basically, there are so many X-rays being taken for screening. The challenge is that there is nobody who's available to read that X-ray on the spot at that time. And we have now deployed in many countries. I'll talk about one of the deployments in Baran. Baran is this very small district, which is about 3 hours from Kota in Rajasthan. And there, we deployed this at a district hospital about 3-4 years back, where we said that any X-ray that is taken is reported by the algorithm. And if the algorithm says that this is TB, you basically do a test then and there. For that, you do a microbiological test or sputum test then and there. And the protocol before that, so people are coming, walking sometimes kilometers to get to the hospital. They're coming from 50 kilometers away, 100 kilometers away, and they come, they take an X-ray, they go back, they don't come back again. There's a huge loss to follow up. And what we were able to do is by including that AI, which can basically interpret that X-ray on the spot. Within a minute, you take an X-ray, within a minute, you get the result. That becomes radically time-saving for the patient, because they are now able to get that diagnostic done right then and there. You come in, get an X-ray, get a result, get a microbiological test done, and you're able to then get treatment pretty soon. Otherwise, that would have taken maybe sometimes weeks or months. And this technology now, this happened about 3 years ago. Last year, WHO endorsed our technology as an automated reader for X-rays for TB, where they said that the protocol for interpreting X-ray, interpreting TB is first, our diagnosing TB is that you take an X-ray, you diagnose it with the Qure.ai product. And if Qure.ai says this is TB, you do a microbiological test, and that is part of the recommended workflow by WHO. So that is how AI is changing lives. So in this, for example, Philippines somewhere, I mean, diagnosis was taking 4 weeks, 5 weeks. They're able to make that happen in a single day. And this is a global protocol change where AI is part of the protocol for TB diagnostics. Second example is stroke, where, stroke patients come in, they've got infarcts, they've got sometimes bleeds, right? And getting that scan read, especially in the night, takes a lot of time. Sometimes it takes hours to get that scan read. And that is where, again, AI can play a role. It can make that read happen within a minute. So we have this technology where you can read a HCD scan, non-contrast CT scan, CT angio, CT perfusion, all of those get read, and the results come back to your phone within a minute. And again, that becomes valuable because an emergency physician, if they want to administer thrombolysis, or you want to, or a neurosurgeon wants to look at that stroke patient at home before they come in for the thrombectomy, or a interventional radiologist wants to look at that scan before they come in for the thrombectomy, we are able to enable that to happen very, very quickly. And our FDA study shows that we are able to make that happen almost 1 hour earlier than it would. You can imagine 1 hour of a stroke patient's life. I mean, basically, it could save a huge number of lives. Right? So that is the promise of AI in stroke. And third is lung cancer, which is again an area that we have been working on for a long time. So there are, all of us take X-rays very often, right? I mean, we take X-rays for routine reasons. We have some infection, we take an X-ray. We are, a lot of times employment requires a X-ray, immigration requires an X-ray, annual checkups require an X-ray. So there are about 1.3 billion chest X-rays taken every year. And why I'm talking about this, lung cancer is one of those conditions which gets diagnosed very late. What happens is, by the time, at least I'm not a doctor myself, I'm a data scientist, but I'm talking about from talking to a lot of experts on this, right? What I've learned is that by the time the mass becomes big and you start showing symptoms, it's already too late. And at that time, the survival is very, very, very short. I mean, sometimes less than a year. So most of the time, less than a year. So one of the ways you can diagnose lung cancer early is to look at that 1.3 billion X-rays, which were taken for routine reasons, and opportunistically screen them for lung cancer. You can potentially find a nodule on an X-ray and you can say, this is potentially lung cancer. You can then investigate further, take a CT, take a biopsy and confirm that lung cancer case. And this is exactly what we're doing. We have a partnership with AstraZeneca now across about 25 countries where we're exactly doing this, where X-rays that are taken for routine reasons are now being screened for cancer, lung cancer, and they are then being tested further for that. And again, this is something which can make sure that there is a stage shift in the diagnosis of lung cancer. You can diagnose lung cancer earlier and you can treat lung cancer earlier using this kind of technology. And this is like a surveillance technology. This is basically AI running surveillance on every X-ray that is taken for any reason, and you can help diagnose that better. So these are some of the stories. Again, we have a lot of other stories about how we are helping hospitals, helping healthcare providers become better using AI. But I think that's sort of the key learning for us, at least, is that we have to go after a very specific problem. I mean, while we can do 60 different findings on the X-ray, the reality is only certain findings are so much more important. I mean, an emergency care finding like a pneumothorax or a misplaced line on a tube is important because that could mean that a patient could lose their life. TB is important, lung cancer is important. So we are going after very specific use cases. And that is how I think we found opportunities in the marketplace for the use of our technology. And I think the final use case is basically improving quality, improving affordability and accessibility.
So Qure.ai is broadly, you are disrupting diagnosis of diseases in healthcare.
We are disrupting is a wrong word. I mean, because it's not great. I mean, the reality is that we are fortunate to have high quality healthcare. Everybody in this room is fortunate to have high quality healthcare. But you go down to the rural parts of the country, you go down to rural parts of so many different countries, the quality is so poor. So we are helping those places improve the quality of healthcare. And
so I use the word disrupting because that is also another abused word. Yeah. So coming to Mr. Sudhir Mishra, is a distinguished Supreme Court lawyer, also run a very successful law firm, Trust Legal. We met 10 years back. And since then, I have seen him doing a lot of healthcare practice in law. So Sudhirji, you also have worked with so many startups, particularly on the hospital side and other such healthcare startups. So what is your tips to the startups? Because when I have seen a lot of startup founders, they are in a hurry, particularly when it comes to signing agreements, whether with the funders or the partners, or getting into any legal sort of compulsions which they have to do while setting up a startup. And many times they are in a hurry, and they may miss a lot of important aspects. So how important is the legal aspect for a startup founder, and what are your few certain words of wisdom for such?
Thank you, Swadeep. I'll take it a little more broad-based than a startup first, and then come to this specific question. My own understanding after 2 decades in courts concerning healthcare cases, and I'm saying healthcare cases, so they are not consumer cases alone. What I have felt is that we have not kept at pace with whatever innovation, whatever new things which have happened in healthcare, so far as the courts and the legal framework is concerned. For example, and I say it with a lot of hope, that I feel that entire advocacy part, so far as the medical devices is concerned, or the new medical bill is concerned, or the surrogacy bill is concerned, or the Consumer Protection Act went through repeated amendments about how much a doctor will pay as a liability. Not even one proper representation I saw ever, anybody coming forth. And when you see in a district court that there is, unlike a European jurisdiction or an American jurisdiction, where you have to deposit a minimum amount before you file a case of malpractices, in India, we have no such caveat attached to it, but no whisper, no challenge, nothing. So we are still in medieval times when it comes to legal advocacy, lobbying, due diligence, all these aspects. So this is the first reality check which I'm telling. And pharma is the only shining example where they understand advocacy, they know how to get things done in the parliamentary system, but whether it's this pricing of the stents, whether it's anything to do with any specialty, see the poor success of entire advocacy in despite whatever government team we handle or something. Something like that has been witnessed just now when you call about bitcoins. When the taxation system happened, they were not ready and they paid a big price. So think about that part, why we are not spending sufficient on the policy and advocacy front. That's point number one. The point number two is that when it comes to spending as a startup in any sector, so I work with single specialties, I work with diagnostic chains, they all want to go to IPO, they all want to become unicorns. How basic is the problem there, that there is no anti-poaching agreement between hospitals or startups in the healthcare. So you are eyeing the same prey base, you are eyeing the same talent pool, and everybody wants the same talent pool. So that's one first basic, and there are litigations happening around that. And of course, law firms have a very good time there. But that is very elementary. You can't stop anybody from leaving a place, joining another place. The second thing which is happening is, you talked about, one of the speaker talked about that you should know very clearly what business you are catering to. So you started a very flourishing diagnostic business. Another investment company came in the same business. He took all your people away literally. And this is happening while I'm fighting one particular thing. And your entire business, which was on a piece of paper, has become a house of cards. So that's second. Third is data privacy. Amit talked a lot about the data, that how data became a big thing. The biggest collateral damage of poor legal management, poor legal advisory is that your data is freely circulated. You thank God for that India privacy laws are not very stringent as of now. So data is very freely traded. You do one test from one lab and other labs start sending you messages on WhatsApp and SMS. Why don't you get your test done? So we have to work on these areas. These are very serious issues which are happening. The last point which I'll say in the first round is that we do a lot of work with the contract administration of hospitals, large hospitals, and also the single specialties, all the private equity funded single specialties. I realize that your contract management or how you go about engaging with the employee completely needs a overhaul the way European and other systems function. And we have advised those things and realized that they are very poor, very poorly understood, mostly done by the company secretaries or the chartered accountant who are not equipped to design those clauses which will protect you and your employees, or you will be protected against a employee action. So these are some initial observations from myself.
Thank you, Sudhir. So contract management is one important aspect which startup founders should definitely look at more minutely and put a lot of thrust on that part in the initial stages itself. Coming back to Dr. Amit. So, Dr. Amit Verma, everybody knows he's one of the pioneers in critical care medicine, and then he became a pioneer in funding, healthcare funding. So he has a beautiful transition and the journey what he has traversed so far. Whenever I get an appointment to meet him, so this thought automatically flashes in my mind कि डॉक्टर अमित से मिल रहा है तो कोई स्टार्टअप सपोज आई एम डूइंग अ स्टार्टअप सो कुछ ना कुछ फंडिंग कर देंगे सो डॉक्टर अमित मस्ट बी facing this challenge day in and day out of a lot of people meeting him with a proposal and pitches or whether friends or a lot of other startup founders approaching him. So what does a funder see in a startup before investing?
So thank you for that. And one disclaimer, we are investors in his company. So if I say something pleasant about him, it is absolutely deliberate. I think from our perspective, and I mentioned this earlier, there's a lot of financial jargon that is used in private equity to make us look very smart. So there's a lot of corporate finance used. And coming from somebody like me who's not a trained finance person, I boil it down to three simple basics. And that's how I look at any funding, whether it's a startup or it's growth or larger checks, smaller checks, because the fundamentals of investing are exactly the same. The first one is answering what is this problem that is going to be solved? What are you solving for? So is it another Me Too, as Mahipal mentioned earlier? Is it a unique proposition? Is it something which can scale up? What are you trying to solve? And that needs to be very clearly illustrated. The second thing I look for is a coherent business plan. And by that, what I mean is how much money do you need? What will you use the money for? What will it eventually get to? And what will the balance sheet look like 5 years from now? And I'm very cognizant that I'm sitting in a room full of doctors. And as soon as I start talking about balance sheets and money and people flare up saying, again, you're talking about making money. No, this is about making sure that you are able to sustain yourself. And I think understanding, and it was mentioned earlier, unfortunately, doctors are not taught a single page of business. And the world has moved on. And even if you're running a clinic, you need to be viable. If you don't understand the concept of viability and hoping that somebody else will fund you, it's a waste of your time. So a 3 to 5 year business plan, which looks at all the scenarios, and lots of times you may not have the ability to do so. We will help create the business plan with you. So it's called a joint business. And the third, which is the biggest to me, is people. Who am I investing in? What kind of people are they? What does their vision look like? What are their gaps in their organization? And will they be amenable for us to fill in those gaps, to create a team? If we can answer these three things, I think most of the times the decision to go, no go becomes much simpler. I will add a last one to it, is how are we planning on exiting together? Because one of the points that is made, and private equity is always accused of, that we are vultures who are basically out to make our own money. And probably we believe very strongly that at the end of the day, whenever I am exiting, I want to make sure that the company is bigger, stronger, and doing better than what I think I have done.
Beautifully explained. Beautifully. So now, last round we'll just have quickly. So to you, Naresh, what are the absolute don'ts for a healthcare startup? Who is everybody talking? Dr. Amit just talked about it.
So maybe I think don'ts also are very, very clear with the startups. I would like to give here two good examples. So one example, actually, I know Prashant is sitting with us. I visited, I think these examples will help us to identify the problem, actually. I personally went to district Baran. There I saw that being working in public health, I know that he was very generous saying that X-ray identification happens in a week. No, this is not true. X-ray identification happens in 14 days, 1 month, or it's seriously in 50% of the cases, it doesn't happen. We have seen cases where patient does not turns up. Is this correct? No. So when we went to the district and we saw that how we were knowing this problem, why there are 1 million patients lost in tuberculosis till date, because diagnosis is not happening on time, diagnosis is cumbersome, patient has to come 2 times, 3 times, and his 1 month is spent only in identifying what problem he has. So when we went to this district and we saw that uh, patient is given time for X-ray, okay, it takes time. Patient's X-ray was done, okay, and on the spot, patient X-ray report is given to him, and report is given to doctor. We said, wow. So a primary identification, a small tool, what value it is adding in primary care, we personally saw it. So it goes back to my earlier question, where I was just saying identification of the problem and really working hard to bring a solution. He was generous in saying, when I see an X-ray, there is a published data which talks about, I means healthcare professionals, when we see 65% time this is correct. But when we see this through this tool, which has read more than 5 million X-rays by now, we see 95% correctness. So maybe we know that countries' radiologists are extremely busy today, and we have less numbers in CT scans, MRI, and we need them for a lot of emergencies. Can this tool augment their efforts of screening, doing this primary screening? Yes. So this is one example which I can cite right now. And maybe one more example quickly is, like, I got in touch with a company in US. They are, by identifying the symptoms, they are telling a disease by symptoms. And how they want to enter in India is, they said, we will do B2C. We will reach out to people, and we have huge money. We will spend our money and we'll reach out to customers. I personally believe this is right now not B2C. This has to be B2B. In India, there are companies which have already evolved in this space. Like we have Practo, who has huge database, who has a lot of backend. So my suggestion to them was, guys, why don't you work first with them? Instead of burning your money every day on B2C, why don't you do B2B first? So again, my suggestion is, these are very, very important things. And why you should choose for go-to-market large companies is, this is one of the key reasons. We as large companies have a lot of experience in this space. We understand this market so well. We have huge network with healthcare professionals, whether it is doctors, whether it is pharmacists, whether it is lab technicians. We can really help in establishing any solution better in the market space. Thank you.
Thank you, Naresh. Very valid points. Very quick questions. Sudhirji, with respect to the patient rights, what is your few tips to the healthcare startups to know about various legal implications, particularly when they are dealing with the patient lives, whether in diagnosis or disease management? What would you like to?
So I would say, I would make it very simple. The patient right is unlimited in India. There's no capping. Because we don't believe in fundamental duties. We believe in fundamental rights in this country as per the Indian Constitution. So that answers it, that patient has so many forums now to go to, online complaint system, file a consumer case by spending virtually nothing, having an arrangement with somebody that, okay, compensation will decide. So all kinds of things are happening. My suggestion is that few basics which you need to do as a startup is that if you're dealing with patient, make sure that the data is exclusively private. It has to be very, very private, because this is something which is now spanning out with so many posts happening. So one WhatsApp, you can see every day today somebody is doing something and it comes in public domain, and people are taking action. So you are in a real time in a social media, and you're somebody sending a message on your behalf for some kind of clinical examination or anything. You make sure that the data is properly procured, the data is properly stored, all the relevant provisions of IT Act are properly followed. Even if nobody is very serious about it, already cases with regard to these matters are going. Especially if you're working in the areas where nobody wants to know the other person what I have been tested for, or I have gone for a IVF treatment, then he'll be very conscious, or she'll be very conscious how you're dealing with the data.
Thank you. Thank you, Sudhir. So coming to Dr. Mahipal, sir, you have been a live example of a doctor entrepreneur thinking about starting a clinic and then setting up one of the largest eye care chain center for sight in India. So what is your words of wisdom for, particularly for the doctor entrepreneurs? When I roam around, meet a lot of healthcare startups, I see a lot of this new emerging trend of lot of medical doctors leaving their medical practice and coming into startup ecosystem.
Well, I think if you look at that, the concept is very clear that as a doctor, if you're working as a doctor, you're making a linear difference. I can do as a doctor maybe 10 surgeries, 20 surgeries, 25 surgeries a day or see 100 patients. So there is a linearity in the impact that I am making. But when you go on to thinking of solving a problem and becoming innovative in getting onto that, you actually are looking at converting this linearity into exponentiality. So you want to make an exponential change or an exponential impact, which possibly as a medico, doing with your own hands or your skill, you can make only this much of a difference. But when you get on to a system where you are acting as an innovator, whether you are putting together a team, whether you are putting together a thought process, like there was a thought process which I would say that there's studies that are being done that a person for say an eye ailment would not want to travel more than 10 kilometers. A person with a cardiac disease would not want to travel more than 200 kilometers. A person for cancer treatment may travel for 500 or 700 kilometers. So there is a difference in the thing that you are solving for. And that is why the point is that for us, it is important to go to the neighborhoods or to places where there are even no eye surgeons, etc. Like radiologists, they are saying to put up centers at that particular point. So that is an exponential difference that we are trying to make. And you have to have a system of DNB, of fellowship, of training, of continuous updation of people so that those who are not, there is so much of discrepancy today between what is coming out from a medical college versus what's coming out from, say, an All India Institute. And now the Ayurveda people are also allowed to do phacoemulsification. I don't know how our ophthalmologist cannot, and they'll be able to do phacoemulsification. That's something. So that is the point, is that the whole chain, supply chain, etc., that has to be integrated. You have to tie up all the loose ends. And that is where a person, a startup today, see, success stories are something that at times motivate you, but they can also lead you astray in the sense that you only know the success story and you don't know where the people failed. And for every one success story, I would say, Amit may be a better person to answer, but for every one success story, there may be 100 people who have failed. But that the point is that you have to iron cast your case. You have to iron cast as to what your proposal is and where you are going and what it is. And one beautiful slide that I liked is that Hindustan mein kuch bhi ho sakta hai, in the sense that ye jo aakhri inhone बैल दिखाए थे, India is a place where you have bullock carts and you have planes. So you have to try to do that, and then there are roadblocks which you can never anticipate. Because what I feel is that India, if you have to succeed, you have to succeed in spite and despite of the systems. The systems, whatever one may say in the government today, that we are becoming friendly and we are trying to help, etc., etc. But the systems are, you have to grow in spite and despite of the systems. That is something very, very important. Entrepreneurship is rising. Entrepreneurship in medical people going in for health jobs or becoming doctors is decreasing, because the time that you are spending to become a doctor and the time at the end of the day, just read this, I think Forbes India had the 100 richest photographs of people, and I don't know how many of you read, how many doctors are there?
So you're not there.
I'm not there. There are only 2 doctors in 100 richest of India, and they are Arvind Lal, Dr. Arvind Lal at 83 number, and Dr. Pratap Reddy at 84 number. So that's the linearity of doctors versus the exponentiality of somebody else today. I think maybe there is this startup, I'm forgetting the name, who doing these aggregation of surgeries, pristine. They might be doing as many cataracts as I am doing as center for sight within a very short period, but they are burning, and people are turning away from them because they don't know who the surgeon is. At the end of the day, again, that is where the linearity will come into view, but aggregation is for the exponentiality. So all that I'm trying to say is that you have to, as he said, we don't learn anything about business. We don't learn anything about exponentiality. Our thought process as medicos is very, very restrictive. That needs to be changed. What he said, a doctor को बोलो यार तू अपना budget बना दे या तू अपना next वो you show where you are going to be 1 year. He thinks कि what are you talking about? We are doctors. This is something like a घर में भी आप अपना budget बनाते हो, in the sense that you say कि भाई मेरा घर में मतलब middle income family or anybody will say कि भाई what I am going to spend, what I am not. So having targets does not mean that you are unethical. Targets are something which are you are making a big step into small steps and doing a day-to-day kind of a situation that this is what I need to achieve and how do I reach there without needing to going to be able to reach where you want to reach. Without a target you are chal rahe ho, us tarah ki baat hai. So I think it is very, very important to have a whole cosmopolitan thing, and you need manpower. Even when I just heard him about AI, things are evolving so much now. There are kids who are coming from IIT who are coming to us. They say we want to take a fundus photograph and we will be able to tell whether a person is at a chance of getting a heart attack or a stroke, because you can see the vessels and you see what it is. Diabetic retinopathy. Tomorrow you will be going to a mall, and with all these things, the person will be able to say, कि भाई तेरे को तुम्हें diabetic retinopathy हो गया, you need treatment or not. You're just going to have there, and you get the thing diagnosed, hypertensive retinopathy, and those, because that's the only place where you can see. So the answer to your question is, the scenario has changed very significantly. More and more healthcare people are going to move into entrepreneurship, where they feel that they can make a bigger exponential difference. As today, I think we are doing a great social cause also. It is for the good of society and well-being of everybody that healthcare needs to be focused. And you have in the process also to make good money. So money I divide into good money and bad money. So जो अखबार में उछलता है at times maybe bad money, but majority of the healthcare is good money, and that is you are doing things in a proper, in an ethical manner. And for every services, if somebody has to kind of pay for it, that person will pay for it. And I think Indian healthcare is going to be booming over the next couple of decades, and things are going to exponentially change with, I think, people like them looking very, very actively at healthcare. I think almost everyone wants to be in healthcare. You had Adani today saying that he's kept, I don't know, 5 billion or whatever, some amount of money that he has kept for going into healthcare. So everybody...
60,000.
So 5 billion, say, okay. Billion. Anyway, so that's what my answer is.
All the best, sir. We want you in that Forbes list soon, sir. Thank you. So we have so what we'll do is that under chair of Dr. Mahipal Sachdev, we have few startups whom we have selected and invited to present very briefly in 5 minutes to 7 minutes about their startup and why they feel that they are one of a good model which can be scaled up, and take some perspective from the panelists here post their presentation. But before I move on to that, the point which is intriguing, I'll just quickly like Dr. Amit Verma to answer, is about this conflict, sir. This has become, like Dr. Mahipal raised the point of startup coming with the technology and an aggregation module and trying to disrupt, again the same word, disrupt, bringing surgeries on one platform. How ethical it is when, and so many case studies now coming up, multi-million funded startups. So where is the balance, and what is, as a funder, what you look at in terms of you can also play a role in terms of creating that balance and the whole ethical ecosystem while such disruptions are happening.
Okay, a couple of quick general points. I fully endorse what Mahipal said, that you can do ethical healthcare, contrary to popular belief. There is no reason for us to be unethical in the pursuit of creating value. That's point one. Point two, very importantly, is that people are very star glamorized with this whole startup idea. It is probably the most painful journey that you will ever undergo. So please do it with eyes wide open. 99% of startups will fail. And they fail because they make the basic mistake of an idea and believing that the idea is already a startup. It doesn't work like that. So I would strongly urge people to spend some time, some groundwork. And you asked me the question that people do come for funding. And unfortunately, a lot of times it's very early in the stage where they have not thought through what it takes for funding to come in. Funding, as Sudhir rightly knows, comes through some legal structures. It comes with some legal binding to you. And there are so many companies out there where the promoters, erstwhile promoters, have lost their shirts and lost their companies. Coming back to your question on aggregators and things, that I don't want to name particular companies, but my view has always been, at the end of the day, your patient is going to be your primary focus. And you have to be true to that patient. And at the end of the day, my personal belief, if I cannot take full responsibility of what is going to happen to my patient, either as an investor, a doctor, or an aggregator, I am going to have a problem someday. And that's my view. I think in India, unfortunately, as Sudhir again rightly pointed out, the legalese is very, very weak. There are lots of gaps on what can happen to you. So we will have to find ways of getting the structure together. And that's where I believe centralization of EMRs, quality metrics, reporting data openly rather than keeping it hidden within corporate hospitals, and bringing it on a central backbone will help us flush out people who are not good and reward people who are actually good medically.
Thank you, Dr. Amit. The very structured answer you gave to all the points.